Hi, and welcome to the Unveiled Widow podcast. I am so excited that you decided to join me today. This is going to be our first episode, and trust me, I am nervous, but I am very excited for this journey that we're about to go on. Before we get started, let me just say I am not a counselor, I am not a clinician or therapist of any sort. So I do recommend that if you're seeking true assistance from a clinician, that you please go get that help. There are tons of resources out there that are available to you, so I highly encourage it. Who I am is I'm Tanisha, your host and creator, and I am a fellow widow. I am someone who has dealt with loss. And while my degree is not in clinical studies or social services or anything of that sort, my degree is in being a widow and experiencing life. And that's what I plan on being transparent with you about and taking you on this journey with me, and hopefully being a source of encouragement for you, to let you know that you're not alone, that there is life after your loss, that you can make it, you can move on. So let's jump on into this podcast, this first episode, where I'm going to give you a little breakdown on me, how I got here. But before we do, come on, subscribe down at the bottom. Don't just keep on shacking up with me. Let's make this connection a pure and true connection. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It'll also allow you to be able to catch my additional videos that will be coming out. So I hope that you're going to take this journey and ride with me for a little while. So who am I? I am Tanisha. I am currently 47 years old. I am the mother of three beautiful children. And I am in a new season, just like you are. For me, my season started in 2018, of me becoming a widow. My husband at the time, my late husband Nathaniel, was dealing with a terminal illness, and unfortunately, he was not able to beat his illness, and he passed away in August of 2018. And when that occurred, clearly, my life and the life of our children was turned upside down. I am not going to lie to you. This widow walk is not an easy journey. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have highs and lows. You're going to have great times, and then you're going to have days where you come home and it's like the bottom just fell out. But it's okay. It's okay to have those days. Just don't give up. Keep pressing. Keep persevering. Keep pushing forward, because there is light and beauty at the end of your process. So here I am. I am going on almost 4 years of being a widow. And like I said, it's had its ups and downs. So I'm going to talk to you very transparently about the hurts that I've gone through, the pain that I've gone through, the victories I've gone through, the mistakes I've made, the situationships. And yes, they do come, and I'm going to be candid about those. But most of all, I am going to talk about how I've been able to heal through this process. And healing doesn't come overnight. It is a process, and everyone's process is going to be different. So don't be ashamed if you feel like your process is taking a long time. And don't allow people to make you feel ashamed. Your process is your process. And how long it takes you to get through it is not for other people to determine. It's your process, and it's okay. If your process takes you a month, great. If your process takes you a year, great. But just keep pressing through your process. So, with respect to my journey, as I mentioned, my late spouse Nathaniel passed in 2018. At the time, my oldest daughter, Lydia, she was a freshman in college. My youngest daughter, Ariana, was a sophomore in high school. And my son, who is the baby of the family, Isaiah, which he is affectionately known by Zay, he was 10 years old. So needless to say, having to step into this season of life at that time was definitely not that it's ever ideal, but it definitely was not ideal when you have children, and especially younger children, because all of us go through this process and it affects each one very differently. Um, so for me, when that time came, my goodness, and we're going to talk about the journey in the next episode, his journey with his terminal illness. But when that time came, and there was so much going on in my life, not only was I dealing with my spouse who had a terminal illness, I was also supporting my mother who was dealing with something as well, her own medical conditions. And I was bouncing between having to support my husband and having to help support my mother, and at the same time still be a wife, still be a mother, and still do everything that was expected of me to do, and to try and do it in grace. And I'm not gonna lie, do it in grace was not easy. um and the reason I will say that is because you try to be as graceful as possible, but let's be real. We are human, and we are going to deal with some human realities when we're dealing with our emotions. And some days you might be able to function in grace, and some other days somebody might come at you the wrong way and they just might get it. So, and that's going to occur. And don't be ashamed of it, but you got to be able to know what stage and what place that you're in. So, with respect to me, starting this process, getting into this process, stepping into this season of being a widow, I was dealing with all of that. And then now I was dealing with my spouse having his terminal illness, which was colon cancer. Um, Cancer is no joke, you guys. For those, I come from a family that has been heavy in cancer, and so I am always very conscientious of even myself as it relates to cancer. There's always a concern. Um, but my husband, my late husband Nathaniel, his cancer, he didn't come from a family of cancer. So when he got it, it was definitely a shock and surprise to us. Um, but talking about handling things in grace, wow. I will get into that in the next podcast episode. But he handled it in grace. And one of the things that I also want to be able to say to you is, as I was going through this process, like I said, I'm going to be transparent. I'm not here to throw people under the bus or to throw shade. That is so not me or my style. But I am going to be very transparent with um, what took place during this time of my life, because if you don't understand my story, you can't understand my journey. And I definitely want you to be able to understand my journey. While we were going through this process of my late husband and his illness, hey, our marriage was not perfect. We had issues going on, and sometimes that makes things even worse because you're trying to process through your issues, and then now at the same time, you're adding on all these extra things that are happening. And again, I want this to be an encouragement to somebody else that, hey, even with what you're going through, you can still go through it in grace, that you still can come out on the other side and be victorious with it. Hey, our situation from the outside looking in, to a lot of people, it probably looked perfect. It probably looked great. Hey, we had the nice house. We had these great kids that played sports. All of our kids play sports. which kept us very busy during that time as well. Um, but also, people look from the outside and they think that things are perfect, and they so were not. We were going through so many things just as a couple, literally to the point where we could have both walked away and we could have been within fair grounds to do so, not just naturally or humanistically, but we are a faith based family. And so for us, we both could have walked away from a spiritual boundary standpoint and said, hey, we're done with this, it's over, it's a wrap. But despite all of our issues, we still stuck it out. And when my husband passed, he passed 2 years shy of our 20th wedding anniversary. So, needless to say, hey, we've been through some things. I'm not talking to you as a wife who was only married 2 years or 3 years, or never went through anything on top of dealing with loss. No, when my husband passed, I was not only grieving the loss of my spouse, grieving the loss of my children's father, but I was also grieving the loss of my marriage, because we were battling some things. And when he passed, we literally were battling these things all the way up until his passing. So I was dealing with a lot of grief, grief of loss, grief for my children. I mean, any mother in their right mind is going to grieve for their children, because you're now in this new place, and it's like, my children aren't going to grow up with their father. My children are not going to get to my daughters are not going to get to walk down the aisle with their father on their arm. Uh, my son is not going to get to experience having the conversation with his dad about girlfriends or about life or about just being a young man, and more importantly, a young African American man. All of these things were going through my mind when he passed. And I think anybody will tell you that knows me, that I took it all strongly, at least from the exterior of things. But on the inside, I was broken. I was torn apart. Um, and I was trying to just hold my head for the sake of my kids, for the sake of maintaining an appearance. And yeah, I'm going to be honest about it. My husband and I, we maintained a good appearance from the outside, um, for people looking in. But my children and those that really knew us, they knew things were not great. And, you're dealing with all of that when loss happens. And then you start dealing with the the grieving process. And we're going to go through that. And we're going to talk about some elements of that that I kind of experienced or got to understand later on that I really didn't initially understand. But this is my process. This is my journey that I want each of you to be able to experience with me. Um, and this process, like I said, it is ongoing. It doesn't stop. You are forever going to be hopefully growing, forever hopefully learning, um, forever trying to move forward to really get to those places of wholeness. But you can get there. But as long as you understand that it is going to be a process, it's going to take some work, but most of all, it's going to take commitment. And what do you have to be committed to? You have to be committed to sticking it out through the journey, sticking it out through the ups and downs, sticking it out through the highs and lows, sticking it out until the end where you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. And I know sometimes that light seems so far off. It seems like it's never going to make it your way. But I'm here to let you know that it does. It does come, but just you've got to persevere and stick it out. So this is just the beginning of this podcast, and just a few things to kind of bring you in on what this podcast is going to look like. The Unveiled Widow. Why did I say unveiled? For two reasons. One, the word unveiled means to uncover or to become unveiled. So for me, I'm going to uncover my life to you. I'm going to be transparent. But also, unveiled also meant for me that because I was no longer married, I was no longer covered by my spouse. He covered me. For those of you that don't understand that, if you are married or were married, your spouse, your husband, he's meant to be your covering for you. And with me now being a widow, he is no longer my covering because he's gone. So I am unveiled. Both in a natural sense, but also in a covenant sense from the standpoint of marriage. I am unveiled. So that's where I came up with the name of the Unveiled Widow. But I hope that you have enjoyed this today. Again, I am going to be going into so much over the next couple of episodes, and I really do hope that you will stay online and enjoy this journey with me. Hey, I'm going to probably shed some tears. It could be tears of joy, it could be tears of sadness, because again, all of that is a part of the process. But the biggest thing that I want you to know is that, hey, there is life worth living. And I have found that to be so true. That I can live an abundant life, that my children can live an abundant life. And don't be surprised, you're probably going to hear from them during this podcast, during some episode of it, that you're going to get to meet my children and be able to see and hear from them, their experiences. But I just want you to know that you are not alone and you can live an abundant life. Again, thank you for stopping by the Unveiled Widow podcast. Join me next week. I will be dropping a new episode every single week. And as we keep journeying along, hey, I may even have some people joining me on this podcast so they can give their story, because you know what? Each of us has our story. And although our stories may not be the same, the one thing that we do share is the loss of a loved one. So, hey, stay tuned. Join me next week on the Unveiled Widow podcast. I'm going to be looking for you. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button so that you can get my next notifications of the next videos. Don't just shack up with me. Come on, let's make this connection real. I appreciate you stopping by, and thank you. Unveiled Widow.